She used dirty gutter water to cook food every day, and nobody knew. People ate, licked their fingers, and praised her food. At the busy garage, people moved up and down, shouting, pushing, and looking for food to eat. In the middle of the noise, there was a big, heavy woman named Mama F. She was the biggest woman in the garage, her body shaking as she walked. Her wrapper was always dirty, her skin covered in sweat, and her hair was never combed. But she was known for one thing, her food. Every morning, people rushed to her small wooden shed to buy food. She sold rice, beans, EBA, and soup. Her food was cheap, and the hungry bus drivers, conductors, and travelers always filled her small space. They did not care that flies danced over her pot. They did not care that her hands were always wet and dirty. They only cared about eating and going back to their work. But Mama F had a secret. A terrible secret. She never bought clean water to cook her food. She never went to the borehole like others. Instead, every morning, before the sun rose, she took a black rubber bucket and walked to the gutter behind the garage. The water there was black. It smelled bad. People threw trash inside, rotten food, dead rats, and dirty plastic bags. But Mama F bent down, dipped her bucket into the water, and filled it to the top. She carried it back to her shed, laughing to herself. Water is water, she always said. Once it boils, it is clean. She used that same dirty water to cook the rice. She used it to make the soup. She used it to wash her plates. And the people who ate her food never knew. They ate and licked their fingers, praising her food. Mama F, your soup sweet die, they shouted. She only smiled, her big body shaking with laughter. But one day, something happened. Something terrible. That day, the garage was busier than ever. Travelers from far places had arrived, and everyone was hungry. Mama F was happy. More people meant more money. She had woken up early, fetched her usual gutter water, and cooked a big pot of jollof rice, a steaming pot of EBA, and a thick pot of egusi soup. The smell filled the air, making everyone's stomachs rumble. People rushed to her shed, pushing each other to buy food. Mama F, give me rice and big meat, a bus conductor shouted. Put plenty soup for me, another man begged. Mama F laughed. Wait your turn. Everybody go chop, she said, her heavy arms shaking as she served the food. But as she scooped a plate of rice, something strange happened. A young boy, about 10 years old, who was eating by the corner, suddenly dropped his spoon. His body shook, his eyes rolled back, and foam came out of his mouth. People screamed. Hey! What is happening? Before anyone could react, another person, a fat woman with a baby on her back, started coughing violently. She held her stomach, groaning in pain. My stomach. My stomach, she screamed. Then a bus driver, who had just swallowed a big bowl of EBA, started vomiting. More people dropped their spoons, clutching their bellies, their faces twisted in pain. The garage turned into chaos. People ran in different directions. Some fell to the ground, groaning and holding their stomachs. Vomit splashed on the floor. Children cried. It was like a nightmare. Mama F's heart began to race. Her hands shook as she dropped the serving spoon. She knew what was happening. She knew the cause. The dirty gutter water. People turned to her, their eyes filled with shock and anger. Mama F. What did you put inside this food? A man shouted. Mama F, you have killed us, a woman cried. Sweat rolled down her big face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The garage was in complete chaos. People rolled on the ground, groaning in pain. Some vomited, some clutched their stomachs, and others shouted for help. The air smelled of fear, sweat, and sickness. Mama F stood frozen, her big, heavy body trembling. Her heart pounded. She had never seen anything like this before. She had been using the gutter water for years. Why was today different? Then, a young man, his face twisted in anger, pointed at her. Mama F, what did you put in the food? Another man, a furious driver, grabbed her by the arm. You must talk today. What did you put inside? Mama F's mouth was dry. She wanted to lie, to say she didn't know. But before she could speak, a woman, who had been silent all along, shouted, I saw her. I saw her this morning. Everybody turned to look at the woman. She was old, with tired eyes. I saw her fetching water from the gutter, she cried. I have seen her do it many times, but nobody believed me. Gasps filled the air. The people who were still standing stepped back in shock. You mean, she cooked this food with dirty gutter water? A man whispered, his voice shaking with disbelief. The anger in the crowd rose like fire. Someone threw a spoon at Mama F. Another person threw an empty plastic bottle. Soon, stones, wrappers, and anything people could find flew in her direction. Mama F raised her arms to protect herself. Please. Please. Forgive me, she cried. I didn't mean to harm anyone. But the people didn't listen. Their pain, their anger, and their shock were too much. Then, a man's voice rang out. Take her to the police. She must pay for this. Mama F's knees went weak. The police? She knew what that meant. She would be arrested, maybe jailed. Fear gripped her heart. She turned to run. But before she could take a step, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. Where are you going, Mama F? The voice whispered coldly. Mama F's heart pounded like a drum. She turned slowly, her heavy body shaking. The strong hand gripping her wrist belonged to a tall, dark policeman. His eyes were cold, his face expressionless. Behind him, two other officers stood, their hands resting on their belts. You are under arrest, the officer said. His voice was calm, but firm. The crowd roared in agreement. Yes. Take her away, someone shouted. She wanted to kill us with gutter water, another voice cried. Mama F fell to her knees, tears rolling down her big cheeks. Please, officer. I didn't mean to harm anyone, she sobbed. I have been cooking like this for years. Nobody ever complained before. The officer's eyes darkened. And how many people have you poisoned without knowing? He asked. How many have fallen sick because of you? Mama F had no answer. She looked around, searching for sympathy, but all she saw were angry faces. Faces filled with betrayal and pain. The people who used to praise her food now looked at her with disgust. Women who had eaten from her pot spat on the ground. Men who had once called her Mama clenched their fists in anger. Even small children pointed at her and whispered. The officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metal gleamed under the hot sun. Stand up, he ordered. Mama F struggled to rise, her legs weak. The crowd watched as the officer locked the cold steel around her wrist. She, who was once the queen of the garage, was now a prisoner. As they led her away, she heard someone whisper, "This is what happens when greed blinds you." Tears streamed down Mama F's face. She had only wanted to save money. She had only wanted to make her cooking easier. But now, she had lost everything. The garage that once smelled of her food now smelled of regret.